What's up everyone, and welcome to another video. Welcome back to all you who watched my first video on how to make your first DJ edit. This week we're going to be going into more of the music production style. I wanted to show you something that really helped level up my style of producing, which is probably one of the simplest things that you could do to help make your sound more professional. And that one thing is referencing. Specifically in this video, we're going to talk about referencing with drums. So without further ado, let's get into Ableton and start working on some music. Okay, so here we are in Ableton, and the song I'm going to be referencing today is a song by one of my favorite producers and a big inspiration to me. His name's Reverb, and it's his most recent song called Can You Feel It? So let's just drag this into Ableton here, and it's at 130 BPM, so we'll just go down here and warp it at 130, and also our track is automatically set to 130, so we're good right there. And let's just trim off this first part right here, move that back. So we have our drums hitting on the markers inside the program. So before we even start, this is a master track, so it's already going to be at its loudest peak. In order to get it at a point where we can properly reference it, it's best to turn this down, and I usually turn it down -6 decibels. So then when we start adding in our own drums, we don't need to bump up the volume for those so high. We can now have a somewhat similar of a volume comparison when we go and add our own drums. So let's listen to what we have here on the extended mix, which always helps with really isolating out the drums. Okay, and as you can hear in the extended mix, there's pretty isolated drums that you can really hear at about this section right here. And in fact, maybe I'll just cut off to 4, so we have this. So let's just use this and maybe put it in a new track. Okay, so we're going to start with the kick here, and I think it's important to really know how the kick sounds specifically in this song. As we can see right here, the waveform of the kick is really long, and it's kind of got this boxy kind of sound to it. Very distorted and very boomy. If we want to emphasize that even more, let's go ahead and put an EQ8 on this track, and let's cut out all that high end. It's the claps and the hi-hats. So now when we know what samples we're looking for, we want to find a kick in our sample library that sounds similar to this kick. The best way to go about that is to just scroll through and see how closely matched you can get to this kick. Let's just scroll through what we have, figure out what sounds most similar to the kick that we have in the reference track. So as we scroll through some of these, it kind of makes a little more sense on why we're picking a specific sound of kick versus others. Say for example, we picked this one. Sure, it's a kick drum, but it doesn't sound anything like the song and the reference track that we're trying to go for. It's a very clean and punchy sounding kick, and it has just a different overall sound than what we're going for. Now, if we were to use this kick, it gives a little more of that distorted sound. As we can see by the waveform right here, it definitely is a shorter kick than what we're looking for. It also sounds a little more acoustic or more of a real kick like that you would hear in an actual drum kit. So I pulled out this kick right here, and now that we're comparing them together, you really can start to tell the likeness of sound and also the length of the kick themselves start to become a little more similar than some of the other kicks that were in our sample pack. Obviously they're not perfect, but you start to get that sound a little more. So let's copy everywhere the kick is on this song. So it's a 4 on the floor track, so we'll copy this. Okay, and we'll mute that and we'll move on to our clap. So it is a little harder to pick out the clap on top of the rest of the drums because it's not as isolated as the kick is, but you can hear it on top of the kick every 2nd and 4th bar. And the one thing that I'm hearing from this right now is that it is a very short clap. So we have a long kick layered with a short clap. So let's do the same thing and go through our samples here and just listen to this clap in our reference and listen to the claps that we have in our sample packs. This clap right here sounds very similar in terms of the timbre of it. It might be a little longer than the clap we want, but we can still layer this over and then just shorten it. Okay, now let's move on to our hi-hat, which you're gonna see on the offbeat every other bar. So let's play our reference track again. And if we want to isolate just the hi-hat, we can even add an EQ and cut out the low so we can only hear the top. And we'll do the same thing in our sample pack, and we'll just scrub through all of our hi-hats and listen to what sounds the most similar to our reference track. Now this sounds like an open hi-hat to me, but it also is similar to the clap, and that's very short. So we'll go to our open hi-hats. Now as we can hear, these hi-hats are at different pitches. So if we want to really get this similar to our reference track, we can warp this and pitch this up. I think we got that the same. And we'll put this every offbeat like we can see here. And then the last thing you'll hear in this reference track is that there is a top loop going on in the background that, once again, we will try to search through our sample pack, find what sounds most similar to it. And now that I listened to it a second time, there actually might be even two loops that are playing on top of this, one of which sounds like a tambourine. So we'll try to find some percussion loops in here. It sounds a little more pitched up, so we'll do the same thing we did with our hat here and just pitch this up. Okay, and the last thing that we're hearing here on this drum loop is very subtle hat loops. It's kind of hard to differentiate it from this tambourine, but you can start to hear something right here and right here. So let's also try to find a hat loop that's kind of this rolling 16th bar or 16th note loop with just closed hi-hats. And there might even be one more loop in here that we can add just to continue to fill in the space that they have sitting at the high end of this drum loop. And another thing that's going to really help this high end fill in a little more space is just by adding some reverb to these. You don't exactly stop hearing them as soon as the sample's over. It'll bleed a little further into the loop, so then it'll fill up the space a little more. So let's add some reverb onto our top loops here. So the one thing I'm going to do before we wrap things up that I'm really noticing here is that the drum in this sample sounds a lot more distorted or saturated than the drum that we currently have. I don't think that necessarily means we need to find a completely different sample, even though you could if you wanted to keep looking, but just because of that sound difference, let's just add on saturator onto this drum. And we can see here where the exact frequency that this kick is hitting. Hover over where our peak is here in the kick. You can see that it's hitting at D, or about 39 hertz. Boost that back down, and we'll try to get that same frequency pitch on our current kick. So where's this one hitting? We'll see here. So this is hitting at A, so that means we need to boost this down. And we might want to roll off some of the high end on this so we get a little more muffled sound. Now let's listen in our clap again. Clap also sounds a little lower in pitch, so let's match this again. Warp these and pitch it down maybe 2. So if there's a certain genre that you're trying to make or a certain artist that you're trying to sound like, this is the most important step that you can do in order to set yourself up for success going forward in the music production process, getting this sound in your song. Your drums are going to be your baseline to start off any track, and if you don't have the right samples or you don't have the right groove, you might not even realize it when you're generally listening to a song, but when you take the time to really try to replicate the sound and the groove of the drums that exist in songs songs that you want to try to recreate yourself, you're never really going to be able to get them exact, nor do I really think you need to get them exact. But once again, I think this is a really important way for you to really start getting a baseline for how you want your track to sound going forward, is just paying attention to the sound of each drum, the groove it's going after, and then continue on from that moment to continue to build your song into the genre or artist that you want to sound like. I hope you all found this useful. It's something that I continue to do and learn every single day when I produce music. Please let me know if you have any questions. Post them down in the comment box below. I'll get back to each and every one of you. Thank you all so much for your time, and we'll see you next week.